a shocking expose on how little education majors are actually learning, college kids who are arguing that actually born babies are no longer babies, and get ready to move Jesus out of Easter because it's Che Guevara Easter or Chaster. Next on The Dr. Duke Show. Yo, peeps. I mean, my homies, not the Easter candy. Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Duke, and this is The Dr. Duke Show. What can I say? We're tragically hip. Every week, Katie and I cover those stories impacting K-12 classrooms and college campuses around the world. Greetings to all of our loyal listeners, and if you haven't done so already, please risk carpal tunnel syndrome and subscribe to the podcast with a simple click on iTunes and never miss an episode. It's absolutely free. Make sure you stick around because at this Easter season, progressives want to make Easter Cheaster. It's a celebration of Che Guevara as Jesus. Make sure you stick around for that. You and I both have a lot of experience with education departments on college campuses. You suffered through an education department to get a teaching degree. I teach education majors every semester. And just a quick comment on how effective and useful education programs at major colleges are.
Well, I'm not teaching in one of their classrooms, so I think my program was a success because I got out of there.
You got out of it. The education programs on college campuses are literally the most radically progressive places on college campuses, and they are the most empty. A degree in education is meaningless. We've said this before many times, Katie, when an education department at a major university wants their kids to learn math, they send them to math professors. When they want them to learn how to become teachers of English, they send them to English professors. So there's no curriculum there other than radical politicized theory. And this first story of the day drives this point home. Teachers have lots of problems. Look at the holes in their ed school programs. If we want to know why, kids aren't learning how to read, kids aren't learning how to do math the right way, kids are graduating. 8th grade NAEP scores suggest that these kids are, 65% of them are behind where they should be in math, 67% in math, and 65% are behind in English. This is why. Look at how we're teaching these teachers, and you'll talk about this more personally yourself. But we're not teaching them discipline-specific information. We're not really giving future teachers, a rigorous college course in geography or in English, literature. Math and science is very underwhelming how we teach these kids. So when they get into the public schools, they know very little about how to teach subjects, but what do we give them instead? Radical politics. If you take a look at this story here, the National Council on Teacher Quality report just came out. Title of the assessment is, quote, "A Fair Chance, Simple Steps to Strengthen and Diversify the Teacher Workforce." Here is the summary of some of the bullet points. While most education programs, this is for the state of Kentucky, right? This is focusing specifically on Kentucky, which admittedly is towards the bottom, but this is not radically different than the way most states educate their teachers. While most programs require teacher candidates to take a course in writing composition, they seldom require any literature courses. Only half require children's literature. So in the state of Kentucky, you can teach elementary school literature for kids, and at half of the universities in Kentucky where you can get licensed to teach, you don't have to take a single course in children's literature. Only 1 in 4 of these programs across Kentucky covers the breadth of math content necessary for all elementary school grades. We had a story just the other day about elementary school math teachers not being able to pass the math tests so they can teach elementary school math. 1 in 3 programs do not require history or geography courses from their elementary school teachers, and 2 out of 3 programs do not require a single science course, not one, that could be considered aligned to what they're actually going to have to teach in elementary school.
And while this is specific to the elementary teachers, my own little anecdote with this is the fact that only half of them are requiring a children's literature course. Now, I was secondary ed, but I did take a children's lit course. And that course, I think a 5-year-old could have passed it. You did not even learn anything about, okay, how is it that a child approaches literature? How is it that they're going to understand the story and the plot lines and all that? The only thing we did in there, the whole point, and this was said on the first day, is we're going to have a semester so you can enjoy reading again. That me, who's supposed to be learning about how to teach the children to enjoy reading, is just me enjoying my reading. So I could pick whatever books I wanted. And then all I had to do for it was a legitimately 30-second tease to get other people to maybe read the book in the future. That's all I did.
This is advanced.
semester.
As an advanced student in an education department about to go student teach, those were your assignments.
That's all it was.
When you were in my Shakespeare class, very seldom do students tell me things that shock me, but you shocked me when you told me how many times in your mandatory course load for your education degree, how many times did you basically take the same course in multiculturalism?
Yeah, the multicultural, it was at least 3, if not 4. I mean, multiculturalism was always put into the coursework.
Everything you did.
And the one that was the class that was supposed to be specific for multicultural education, that's what it was titled, race, class, gender. And it was, actually the class was broken down in those 3 categories. That's all it was, race, class, gender. And right when I got that syllabus, I'm like, this is going to be an awful semester.
What percentage of your classroom work and education would you say, was over your entire degree program? What percentage of it was dedicated to race, class, and gender at the expense of everything else?
88, 89%, maybe.
Let that sink in.
If that low.
Almost 90% of what she did was the same political progressive emphasis on race, class, and gender. It had nothing to do with math skills, had nothing to do with making these kids better readers. You were going to be going for a degree in English teaching and
history.
And history.
It was double for social studies.
How much history did you have to take?
Class-wise?
Yes.
Well, I came in with a different degree, so I had 1 history course I had to take. One.
Let this sink in, Mom and Dad. I don't know how many ways till Sunday we could tell you this, but it's absolutely true. Not only are your teachers unwilling, the curriculum doesn't allow your teachers to give your kids a classical education, to make them really proficient in math and science and reading and everything else. Our teachers aren't prepared to do it. So even if you manage to throw out Common Core, even if you manage to roll back the clock 75 years back to a time where we gave kids a comprehensive education in subjects that matter, your teachers wouldn't be able to teach them. In the state of Kentucky, we've got a table Mike's going to throw up on the board here. This table, it shows elementary school level teacher preparation in Kentucky again. Only 3 of the 17 schools listed, only 3 of them, 18%, cover math adequately. Only 6% of programs offer coursework that require any pretest competency in geography. Let that sink in. And if you look at the chart there, all those blank spaces, moving from the left to the right, on the screen, in terms of composition, you can see that almost every school requires some composition, but then you move over to children's literature and you see the gaps. And then you look at world literature, only 1 school gives them any kind of preparation. You look at American literature, almost nobody. American literature, these teachers are not being prepared to teach it, and the gaps get bigger and bigger and bigger. Not only have we hamstrung your kids, not only are we artificially holding your kids down in the name of social justice, of refusing to allow those kids who could do higher level work do it, because kids are going to get a trauma, the lower level performing kids will get a trauma. We have absolutely destroyed teacher knowledge and teacher competency here.
It goes beyond just the elementary teachers, because we have a second article talking about, well, what's it like for the secondary teaching programs? And again, that's what I was a part of. It was actually an op-ed by a student who they name as Nick Wilson, but that's not his real name because he doesn't want to be, basically found out. But he was talking about how the University of Washington's secondary program is absolutely awful. And he says, I expected the program to be grounded in challenging practical work and research, both in terms of how to develop academic skills in young people and also in the crucial role public education has in overcoming some of the most grave problems in the society. That could have been a quote for me when I went in, because I wanted to get back in the classroom, because I love teaching. I always loved teaching, and I had thought, maybe I'd want to be a professor, but thankfully I didn't want to go down your path. But
smart move.
And then, but I wanted to be back in the classroom. I thought, okay, high school, history, English, I love those things. And so when I came back to go get my teaching degree, I had that exact, thought about, I want to be, have some challenging work and be able to do research and to really help children. And then but I quickly realized,
there, this is a conscientious young man who realizes that an education degree is crap. But even that statement of what he wants shows how far down the rabbit hole we go. I get the first half of this. I expected to go to an education program basically to learn academic skills to teach kids academics. All right, that's all it takes. All you're supposed to have.
Yep.
But look what he appends to this. Also, in the crucial role public education has in overcoming some of the most grave and intransigent problems in society, right? In other words, half of what I'm supposed to do as your kid's teacher is psychosocially develop them, change their attitudes, make them think the way progressives think. This is a good young man who clearly gets what a failure his education degrees is, and yet he is already convinced before he set foot into the program that I have to change the world through your kids. I have to use your kids, mom and dad, to make my worldview, your worldview, worldview, so we fix the problems.
Well, and I think a lot of that has to come through, I'm going to give Nick the benefit of the doubt here, that it comes through that, we're supposed to, like, teachers are supposed to change the world and help those young minds. But I always am an optimist with it. I get where you're coming from with it, too, and what it most likely means in today's society. But I had that same kind of, I want to go and help young minds and mold them, not the way, in a bad way, but to help them be inspired.
By education, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it seems to me the purpose of a teacher is not to school kids in their own worldviews, or to make them vote the way I vote, or to make them crusaders for pro-choice issues or for environmentalism. My job as a teacher is to put in their hands the great minds dead, to expose them to great books, to give them high-level math and science and writing skills, to make them curious, to follow whatever path their heart leads them down, not to program them. But having said that, I suppose we shouldn't be spending this much time piling on a kid who at least recognized what a waste of time it is. Go take it a little farther, Katie.
Okay, he did object to the program that he was in, University of Washington, their essential mission, which was to combat the colonialism, misogyny, and homophobia that is endemic in American society at the expense of training novice high school teachers.
Let me repeat that. The state of Washington sees its primary mission for public school teachers is to combat colonialism, misogyny, and homophobia. That's what your kids are getting in these schools, at the expense of training high school teachers how to teach.
Yep. And he also says that the faculty in the program have imparted canonical status on an academic paper that blames the subconscious privileging of white students' behavior by a white teacher on a black student's relatively low academic performance in a 6th grade class. So he talked about how this is something that was happening. He says, in one of our classes, students were asked to parse a transcript from the classroom of a white American teacher in which she challenged one of her Native American students who had claimed the water is biologically alive. Okay? And rather than actually analyzing the academic aims and maybe thinking about it, how she came to develop her lesson plan or even her techniques for teaching, the purpose of this session was to impress upon us that she was perpetuating oppression because she had rejected the spiritual beliefs of a non-Western culture.
This was a science class. It was not a squishy feel-good sociology class. It wasn't social studies. It wasn't Let's Be Kind to Native American Day in class. It was a science class in which a student argued that water was biologically alive as anything else was. Now, can you imagine a Christian kid saying, by the way, according to my Baptist background, I think the water is alive. Can you imagine how hard a science teacher would come down on that kid? But here, the teacher got in trouble in a science class for not backing off science to let this kid have his own made-up worldview.
Yeah, and one of the main complaints that all my peers even had, the ones who weren't just so, in love and infatuated with some of our professors, the ones who recognized what we weren't getting as an education, we actually challenged, why aren't we being taught? How do we write a lesson plan? How do we teach this? We kept having to say that in every one of our classes because they would go off on their own tangents instead of saying, all right, here's what the lesson is. We need to teach this concept. Here's how you structure it to make it so the entire class can understand it. Never did that.
Right. And why do we teach this? Why have we gotten rid of the great books of Western and world culture and replaced them with tendentious teen fiction, highly sexualized teen fiction that deals with bullying and transphobia? You're not even, in every basic subject you could squeeze it into, you were doing the same lessons again, and they were all political. None of them were aesthetic or artistic or historical. It was just pure social engineering.
Yeah, back to that children's lit course, the one assignment that I did kind of enjoy was classic versus contemporary. We had to take a classic novel and read a contemporary one with kind of the same theme, and then we had to decide which one we would teach. You can guess which one I chose, the classic. Mm-hmm. But most of my peers were like, well, contemporary, because it relates more to what the kids are feeling. And a lot of them were race, class, gender. It was all like homophobic.
Feeling, right?
It was all about it.
As if none of the great books of Western culture have ever dealt with race or class or gender, right? Only now, and this is the argument. And you see people making this argument all the time. We got to stop teaching Shakespeare, the classics, teaching the great books of Western culture, because kids are dissociated from it. Our kids are somehow different than every generation of kids before.
They're special.
They want politics. They want activism. They don't want all that hardcore junk. They want activism. No. You teachers want activism, and you're projecting that on your students.
Now, before we move on, just a reminder that this show has grown because of you. So please continue to help us by spreading the word on the Dr. Duke Show by liking, commenting, and sharing this episode on whatever platform it is that you prefer. And better yet, share it on all of the platforms. Every single darn one. All right, moving on. Our next story involves Boston College, where the wonderful AOC attended. So, they're producing quality candidates for life's careers. We have a Boston College pro-choice student who was at a talk, and she was in a Q&A with the speaker, who is Kristen Hawkins, who's the president of Students for Life of America. And she's on a university tour doing speeches called Lies Feminists Tell. And this pro-choice student believes and insisted that a baby born after a failed abortion is not a baby. So let that sink in. A baby born after a failed abortion is not a baby. Listen to what she says.
If a child is born alive during an abortion procedure, because sometimes the abortionist misses the heart when they're administering the digoxin, should the abortionist have to provide health care to that child?
No.
Why?
Because they're performing an abortion. So before that, they've already determined that it's not a baby. I know you're telling me that science has determined one thing, but...
You just said they determined it's not a baby. How can an abortionist determine... How can an abortionist not determine it's not a baby?
And what this demonstrates beyond a shadow of a doubt is something we've been saying for a long time in the Dr. Duke Show. The so-called tolerant, compassionate progressives, their ideology, which is being monolithically taught to these kids, there is almost nowhere, no place on an American college campus, except for the stray conservative speaker like this woman, where you're going to get a different worldview. What you see here in the case of this repulsive student comment is that politics at the expense of genuine compassion and feeling. We're teaching kids that their politics allows them to, they don't even recognize how callous they are. This is a living, breathing human being, but because mom targeted for abortion, if it somehow escapes the knife, escapes the gruesome vacuum machine that comes to take its brain and lives, it's not human because they say so, their politics say so. That level of inability to empathize with another human being is what you get when you radicalize politics the way the left has on college campuses. This is what you get.
Well, and you can see in the way she speaks, it's programmed in, oh, they're talking about the U.S.-Mexico border, and if those children come in, absolutely, yes, they should be given care, absolutely. But then you turn it to the other speaking point about, Planned Parenthood's mentioned, that means I have to be against it. So automatically that female student's like, well, no. If someone asks you if a baby who's born alive during an abortion at Planned Parenthood should get care, and you say no, and you can't stop and think for a half second what that really means, like you can just tell she's so disconnected.
And not thinking is exactly right. This is the death of critical thinking, right? In order to have empathy, you have to be able to think critically. These kids aren't thinking, and therefore they're not feeling. They're reacting out of instinctive rage that we've bred in them for any worldview that's not progressive. And I guarantee you the fact that this was a conservative speaker, there was nothing this speaker could show. There was no images this speaker could demonstrate. If you brought in, this pro-choice, pro-life speaker had brought in, right, a 6-day-old baby, still with the scars of it having been tried to be aborted, this woman, and handed it to this student. So while she was asking her question, she was cradling that baby, and the pro-life speaker said to her, look that baby in the eyes and tell her she's not a human being. I bet you she would have done it.
Yeah, well, and the thing is, you can see that student can't think or can't do anything on her own because she couldn't even ask her question by herself. She had to have that friend come and just give her a big hug to support her because that's what empathy is.
We need a hug to talk about how live-born babies aren't human beings. And the same kind of weak compassion, right, that we're going to hug each other while we deny the life of a living, breathing human being is the kind of critical unthinking that goes on in college campuses today, period.
And that same kind of unthinking is going on at Duke and the University of North Carolina. Together, they sponsored an anti-Semitic conference. So Ami Horowitz, who was on the show last week, he's a documentary filmmaker. He decided he was going to visit the University of North Carolina, and they were having this joint conference with Duke on the conflict in Gaza. And so the conference itself was 3 days long, and hundreds of professors and students attended it. And I guess basically, in Ami's words, it was all about bashing Israel and whitewashing the terrorist organization Hamas. And so Ami's a filmmaker, but they wouldn't allow him to come into the conference with an actual camera. So, of course, he got mic'd up and has some hidden camera. And listen to what some of these people were saying when he asked about using the anti-Semitic trope that Jewish money controls American politics. Is that true?
I first asked them about the most powerful modern anti-Semitic trope. Does Jewish money control U.S. government policy?
U.S. government policy? Oh, absolutely. You guys, not you guys. Jewish lobbyists are very rich.
I'm Jewish. I don't know. Is
Yeah,
it?
I could already tell. You didn't have to tell me.
I don't take offense to that at all.
No, I mean, I appreciate people who are questioning their own background.
What is so unbelievable about this is that these people are not just saying, as they're talking to each other, milling around anti-Semitic things, shockingly anti-Semitic things, but they actually invited a Islamic rapper to make fun of Jews and to boast about his own anti-Semitism, and he actually got the audience to begin singing along with him. I swear to God, if you did this with any other ethnic group, except perhaps white men, if you had this kind of targeting, this kind of mocking of people's ethnicity and their race and their beliefs, this would never be tolerated on a college campus. This, my friends, is national news. This should be leading every news story, how major public universities in this country are actually promoting the mockery, the repeating the same stereotypical racist tropes about Jewish people, and the kicker. A grant for $250,000 from the federal government helped them do it. Here's what really, really bothers me about this. Not only was there a grant for $250,000 from the feds to put this program on, not only did Duke and UNC support this themselves across the board, you had 38 different faculty departments who signed on to sponsor this conference where they are literally mocking Jews. At one point, Ami is pulled aside and he says, well, you know, I can't believe you're saying this. You know, I'm Jewish too. And she, one of the females said, I know it. I could tell you were Jewish.
Yeah, and then
I could tell.
And Ami's like, no, I'm not offended at all by that.
Right.
Oh.
I mean, this is the worst kind of rank, overt, this is not microaggressive stuff. This is not subtlety or institutional racism. This is the University of Duke in North Carolina hosting a conference that's sole purpose is to blame, scapegoat Jewish people. This is one of the worst things I've seen in my 25 years as a university professor, and it's treated by like a great big huge joke by our so-called progressives in charge of protecting all of our kids, shaping their worldview so that they're intolerant and inclusive. This is a naked attack on one particular group of people who have been attacked for a long time, and it needs to stop.
All right, well, let's move on to our next story where we actually have the campus police being kicked off of campus. A campus police chief has been put on leave after student outrage because, oh my, on his personal Twitter page, he liked the NRA and the President of the United States. So last week, Daniel Hecht, he was the newly selected campus police chief at Mount Holyoke College. He was put on administrative leave because basically a student went looking and found some old tweets that he liked. And it was obviously the NRA. One of the tweets that he had liked from the National Rifle Association was wishing people a Merry Christmas. How dare he? And then the other one is one that stated, if guns are outlawed, only outlaws will have guns. And then other tweets that this student found were from President Trump discussing the border wall and the government shutdown. And so, you know, I feel unsafe now on campus.
Look at the last three stories we've had where a adult educated college kid calls a living baby born who survives an abortion not a human being. We have campus students and faculty engaging in a conference that engaged in dramatic and palpable Jew hatred, scapegoating. And now we have a situation where a sheriff, a person is hired to become, right, one of the campus security guys, right? And he has, like the NRA, he has been pro-Donald Trump, and he dared to say Merry Christmas at one point. And for that, he has been put on suspension. What has he done other than associate freely? It is not a crime yet to be a member of the NRA. It is not a crime. He didn't even have a MAGA hat on, right, to trigger these kids.
Oh, they'll find it.
They went back and they found from years ago a few tweets, and because of one dumb progressive kid who managed to drudge up, the horror, that he was a member of the NRA, the university administration suspended him. Betting you that at University of North Carolina and Duke is not suspending any of the faculty who participated in that Jew baiting, that nasty anti-Semitism, yet this potential chief of campus police is put on leave. He's not allowed to work because the university has to investigate his former ties with the NRA. What is going on our campuses?
They had hosted this forum then to ease the students because it's always about if something happens, let's all come together together,
comfortable,
and sit in a circle, sing Kumbaya, and then talk about our feelings.
It's not about actual learning; it's about comfort.
Yeah. So Hecht said he wanted the campus police to grow a better relationship with the community, and he's been known, I guess, in his previous service about how he's really good at getting the community and the police together, kind of on the same page. And so he wanted the students to know the campus police as human beings. And he said, "It was clear to me during the event that I have work to do in order to better lead a campus police department charged with supporting and protecting this wonderfully diverse, intelligent, and committed community of students, faculty, and staff."
Again, the problem with this is when you apologize that abjectly, when you literally get down and grovel, right? With all due respect, officer, it's not an intelligent campus and community if they're saying stupid things like this. It's not an incredibly diverse intellectually group if they see all police officers, any police officer who's a member of the NRA as a problem. Here's what the student said, quote, "It was unacceptable for someone in charge of keeping any community safe, let alone a campus as diverse as MHC's, to be publicly displaying his support for hateful regimes and organizations." Hateful regimes, right? To support Trump is to support a hateful regime. To be in the NRA is to support an oppressive, racist organization. If by apologizing to them, officer, you are conceding that the President of the United States and the entire American government and the NRA are tools of tyranny and oppression. Good job, officer. Maybe for that you deserve to lose your job. How do you defend this when the guy accused doesn't stand up for himself?
Well, we actually have a university where the cops did something very good. It happened last week on the University of Missouri Kansas City campus, and Michael Knowles, the execrable Michael Knowles, as he's called by...
He calls himself.
No, he gets called that by Ben Shapiro. He works for the Daily Wire, but he also is on the speaking circuit for the Young Americans for Freedom. And so he was at the university to give a speech called "Men Are Not Women." And, of course, protesters came...
"Get me my fainting count, Scarlet. I'm going to have the vapors. Men are not women."
Yeah, and
what a radically dangerous thing to say.
That's triggering right there. So that speech, Michael Knowles started to give his speech, and let's just say it got a little out of hand. He already knew that there were protesters in the room when he started because they had sent out like an invite group thing. And in this, Michael grabbed the phone and he says, "Oh, they're going to be doing a silent walkout." And he read from the phone what the plan said. It says they were to register under an alias name and be disruptive. At the sound of a phone alarm, like Pavlov's dogs, they are supposed to walk out silently because otherwise it would put trans students at risk. And they began ranting during the speech, but at about the 15-minute mark of Mike's speech, the group of protesters really started getting rowdy, and then it got violent. So check this out.
Well, it's very difficult to use my platform when people use the heckler's veto to try to shut up any opinion that disagrees.
The reason the cop had to grab this person and put her down and tase her, the reason the student got put down is a protester actually threw a white chemical toward Michael.
So, again, you see just how insane our campuses have become. Literally, these kids are associating a voluntary talk, not a talk that anybody is required to attend, a voluntary talk that they didn't have to attend. Michael Knowles talking to a full house auditorium about why maybe we should pump the brakes on radically re-engineering gender this quickly. Men are men. And, you know, I myself have found myself in trouble on college campuses for daring to say something like, you know, guys, biology remains a literal thing even after you associate with however many genders you want to associate with. Just by calling yourself at one or another doesn't mean that biology vanishes. I am under investigation for that as we speak, for saying that. Michael Knowles is exactly right. How successful the academic left has been, and the faculty enablers, of making anybody who disagrees with any one of their pet causes responsible for violence, right? So in order for Michael Knowles to show up, or for me in a classroom to say what I said, we're perpetrating violence on people. And no one challenges that definition. There is no violence. I tell my students, and you probably had to sit through it, Katie, I tell my students all the time, if you think words are violent, if you think words actually have the power to physically hurt you, you got to drop my class. Because that's the most childish thing in the history of universities, that we need to stop that.
Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words can really hurt me.
On a tip.
And that's on a poster in the education department at the university.
Yeah, until they find out it's there. The bottom line is, if we're going to equate conservative words with hate and violence, because that's what we're doing, there's nothing too liberal you can't say on a college campus. There's no slur you can hurl out against a cisgendered white male that would be actionable. However, violence, even moderate conservative positions, even moderate Democrat positions now, are being seen as violence being perpetrated against living, breathing students. And unless somebody challenges that, we're going to be in big trouble.
Let's move on to UCLA and our good friend Che Guevara.
Well, we saved this story for last because, after all, it is Easter week. And it goes to show you that the only way a secular university is going to take time out to actually celebrate or recognize the week of the Passion of our Lord is if you can transport Jesus out and put Che Guevara in. So UCLA event compares communist leader Che Guevara to Jesus. And we know this isn't the first time. We've all seen the dumb college kids with their Che crucified shirts, right? Barack Obama, the most sensitive man in the history of the world, hashtag trademark, right, in his mom jeans, had a big 6-foot-tall mural of Che in his Chicago offices. People don't want to talk about the fact that Che was notoriously anti-homosexual. He was a raging, violent homophobe. We don't want to talk about the fact that it was Che Guevara who set up the killing fields of Castro's Cuba. This man is complicit in the deaths of hundreds of thousands, if not potentially 1 million people. And yet, in Los Angeles, California, for Easter week, this event compares the communist favorably, by the way, compares Che favorably to Christ. The University of California, Los Angeles hosted a seminar comparing communist Che Guevara to Jesus, with the speaker calling Guevara a quasi-divine cosmic force and showing numerous art pieces that depicted Guevara with a crown of thorns and crucified. By the way, it wasn't white bread Americans who crucified and assassinated Che. It was another South American country who wanted him dead for violently trying to overthrow the government, right? A UCLA professor of emeritus art history, David Kunzel, was invited by the Department of Religion to make the presentation titled Jesucristo. Spanish is not my best language, but Jesu Cristo, right? The body of Christ. Take Jesu Cristo and replace it with Jesu Cristo. That's why I jokingly refer to this as get rid of Easter and called it Chaster, right? And make it all about the suffering of Che Guevara. And correct me, you're as much of a biblical scholar as I am. Point me to the passage in the Gospels where Jesus actually murdered people because they were gay. Can you do that?
Oh, let me get my...
Yeah, get your concordance out. And also find the passage for me where Jesus was executed for violently trying to overthrow somebody else's government. Give me that passage. Can you find it? No?
I'll have to get back to you.
Not one of those obscure letters of Paul?
No, I must have missed
that. Paul to the Bolivians?
I think I read the Spark Notes version.
St. Paul to the Castros. Is it in there somewhere?
No, I didn't see it in
Listen
there.
to this. A quote from Professor of Art Emeritus David Kunzel. Quote, "As God created light, is light, Che is radiance. Che Guevara, once the epitome of armed struggle, has evolved to an avatar of justice, peace, and love, as Jesus always was, but no longer is exclusively. Make room, Trinity, the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, for Father, Son, Holy Spirit, and Che." What? Maybe the sign of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, Che. Ooh, punched myself a little too hard. Carrie, I'm gonna pass out. Katie, you take it over.
Okay.
Oh.
Well, actually, I wanted to play a little game with you. Since these two are supposed to be basically the same now, let's see how their words line up. So I want you to tell me who said the following. Was it Che or was it Jesus? "But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your Father in heaven. He causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous."
That
Who
would
said
be
that?
the big JC.
Big JC. Okay. So that's how he talks about loving your enemies.
That would be
praying.
a quote from Christ. Yes, indeed.
Okay. Well, how about this one? "Crazy with fury, I will stain my rifle red while slaughtering any enemy that falls in my hands. My nostrils dilate while savoring the acrid odor of gunpowder and blood. With the deaths of my enemies, I prepare my being for the sacred fight and join the triumphant proletariat with a bestial howl."
That would be the progressive Jesus Christ, Che Guevara.
Oh, okay. So that's the difference in how they view their enemies.
Jesus in combat fatigues, ladies and gentlemen.
It's your favorite time of the week. It's time for Extra Credit. This week sponsored by Stop Eating All Food Right Now. If you're eating anything, just trust me, set down the fork for the next 5 minutes. We begin this week at the University of Kentucky, where student activists protested the costs of food and housing in a basic needs campaign. They decided to have a flexible hunger strike to show solidarity. Of the 300 participating, only 6 did not eat. The rest agreed to a single or multi-day fast, eating or giving up 1 meal a day, skipping 1 meal on a single day, or create your own plan. And that was effective enough for University President Eli Capilouto to cave to 7 of their demands, all SJW related. My question is, if the strike lasted but 6 days and not every demand was met, is that more like a failed diet than a hunger strike?
They see you coming with a left-wing protest. Don't worry, you're going to get what you ask for. You don't even have to diet. Just say, I'm going to eat 1 less fry out of my Happy Meal every day until you give me what I want, and the university will hand you over the keys to the kingdom.
It's a good thing that at least some of them stopped eating, because this next story will make you want to throw up. Feminist and LGBT activist Erica Hart, who is also an adjunct professor at Columbia University's School of Social Work, has decided to fight misogyny. So she's going into men's bathrooms and leaving drops of blood on the floors of the stalls. As she said with her photo of it on Twitter, left a present in the men's bathroom as a reminder that any gender can get their period and use whatever bathroom they want. There's a clear reason she's in social work and not biology.
And where are the campus nut jobs about safety? Because this is a health hazard.
And if that wasn't gross enough for you, we have a middle school teacher who claims that it's natural instinct to kiss a child who pushes you down on a desk. California's Justine Karen Nelson, now 33 years old, claimed in court that she was pressured into having oral sex with an 8th grade boy. They had exchanged about 100 Instagram messages, and then she gave in to pressure of being intimate with him, and she testified that she felt powerless to turn him down. He was 13 and she was 31. In addition, her husband is a gym teacher at the school. If convicted of lewd or lascivious acts with a minor and oral copulation, she potentially faces 8 years and 8 months in prison. Then maybe she'll feel real pressure.
The teacher and the student will be married in 6 months, and they'll have a baby in 3 years. It's California.
Speaking of child sex offenders, another one was unmasked at a drag queen story time, and it's at the same Houston Public Library system. Activist parents with mass resistance were able to track down a drag performer with many aliases who has sexually assaulted children and who has publicly recounted his history as a transgender dominatrix and prostitute for hire. Mass Resistance held a press conference at the library demanding an entire audit of the background checks and volunteer applications at the libraries. They demand a city ordinance requiring background checks for all city-sanctioned programs for children. And that's what parent involvement actually looks like.
That's right. I mean, these public libraries, they're getting as bad as the schools, right? The purpose of a public library now is not to quiet old ladies who shush you a lot and hand out books. It's all about the resistance, baby.
And that's your extra credit for this week. Now, if you have any stories you'd like to suggest below, just type them right there in the comment section. And then make sure you hit that like button and share the episode. And don't forget to subscribe to the Dr. Duke Show on iTunes, where you can hear all of these great stories and you don't have to look at our ugly mugs.
And that does it for us this week on the Dr. Duke Show. If you like what you heard, please share the YouTube episode and the podcast with your friends. And let me tell you, friends, Che Guevara is still moldering in his grave while Christ is risen. Happy Easter to you all. For Freedom Project, I'm Dr. Duke. She's Katie, and we'll see you next time.